If nobody is good or bad, if no one is right or wrong, what then? We are thrust into the thing that most of us work so hard at we don't even realize, which is having to take responsibility for our actual opinions. Unfortunately, we're really good at avoiding thinking for ourselves. We have already seen the greatest asset inflation in world history.
Alistair, the movement that we have been witnessing for decades and probably for most people is becoming more prominent in maybe the last decade or two and we see it in what's being taught in the public schools, but it seems to me to be government, which is government that is responsive to the people and really responsive to the people, the majority of the voters and what the sentiment of the voters are. I mean, that's what politicians do. That's the game. If I want to be a politician and have tenure there, then I have to pretend at least that I'm going to give the people what they say they want. And it is what it is. I won't go any further than that. But that being the case, we're seeing, as we saw, really, I mean, going back, decades and decades, but really coming out of the Great Recession of 2008, the bailout, the big bailout of the banks, and that was, we thought that was unprecedented, and then we've seen that be quadrupled or more, and we're not through with what happened last year in COVID. We see the current administration picking up where the last administration was. Just no end to the amount of infrastructure and stimulus that we can put out there. And yet I see a lot of that, Alistair, as being big government, not all, but the majority feeling that government knows better, that the government would like to have more control over the private sector. Well, we've seen that happen through various crises. It's happening, whether it's by intent or not, it's happening. So with this movement, again, with an entrepreneur who wants to remain sovereign, have choices and options in an environment where it seems like the government wants more and more to have workers and dependents on the government for all kinds of benefits, which become permanent. You can't take those away without mass chaos in the streets. Positioning wise, would you say, is this a binary option, which I know you don't like, but I'll just throw it at you? Would this be, should one look to stay relatively small and nimble and adaptable in whatever environment they enjoy, whatever that it looks like? Or does one need to collaborate and build a larger mass where you could potentially, I don't want to use the words take on, but be more on equal footing with the government that likes to work with consolidated industries? Does that question make sense to you? Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I think so. I think that this is exactly as you've captured, just one more reason for us to start paying attention to this intellectual, and I would make the case, political sovereignty. You joked I hate binary choices. I do, largely because I've used them on others and I've had them used on me. I always use the example of I heard my wife do it one night and it just cracked me up. Do you want to walk to the bath or get carried to the bath? And here we are, the kids, thinking, well, we're going to walk because we've got our sovereignty. You're still getting in the bath. And so this is why I have an instinct to catch myself when there's only two options in front of me. I know that somewhere upstream creativity died, or I was not paying enough attention. The political, I think you're exactly right. It's my sense that Washington, D.C. is Instagram, which is basically something that is a physical manifestation of a popularity contest. And what we see on Instagram and TikTok and so forth is the depths and extent to which people will go to try to stay in the public eye. They will do anything. I mean, literally, remember that TV show Jackass? They will do anything to get your attention, and they will tell you anything you want to hear. They will caution you against your very own brother or sister. They will create divisions so that narratives can be spun off. And being aware of that, the most useful filter for me is to say, if nobody is good or bad, if no one is right or wrong, what then? Well, then we are thrust into the thing that most of us work so hard at we don't even realize, which is having to take responsibility for our actual opinions, not the regurgitation of somebody else's, but to discover what we really think and pay attention to the results that certain policies, ideas, philosophies will create, have created in the past, and the commensurate price that society will pay for them. That's really what it is. When I say to you, want to pick red or blue, I've leapt over this chasm of intellectual gold, just in the service of snagging your attention to move on. These people are bad. These people are good. Let's take from them, or let's get more from them, or what have you. I think this is what we're really doing. Unfortunately, we're really good at it, which is avoiding thinking for ourselves, myself included. It's so much easier just to someone to be good or bad, right or wrong.
You mentioned the recent Case-Shiller home price index numbers and being up more than the month over month being up greater than they were back in March of 2005 before we hit that recession period. So we've seen this great move towards higher prices across the board. Some of the commodities have come back down again, but overall we're seeing a trend towards inflation. So a lot of people would say, well, we're into this inflationary period like we had back in the 70s. Others would say that's transitory. That's what Jerome Powell would have us think, and those in the Federal Reserve. Do you fall in one camp or the other, or again, is it too early to stake a claim as to what this trend looks like going forward the next half a dozen or through the decade?
Yeah, I think in my mind, I'll frame it as what is the risk? Which of these are the risks? And they're always a risk. Both are always a risk, deflation or inflation. It's a matter of which one is most dangerous right now. So which one is the higher probability, and which one of them has the greatest negative outcome, and then which has the greatest opportunities, and what are the positive outcomes that could be created. When we see it that way, we realize that all asset classes at all times around the world are experiencing, that's what the cycle is, periods of inflation and deflation, rising and falling. If we define deflation or inflation as the dilution of the power of money, so money buys you less. In inflation, of course, deflation means money buys you more. Now, more of what? And this is important because we've got to be very clear in the language we use about inflation in particular. Inflation of what? And the one question nobody will ever tell or try to answer is by when. Inflation of what, by how much, by when. That's really what we're struggling with. We have already seen the greatest asset inflation in world history, eclipsing even our prior peak in 2007 and 2000, prior to that, Japan in 89. So it strikes me that while I am very, very personally familiar with inflation and its mechanisms and so forth, having successfully, thankfully, navigated it myself, watched my parents do the same in Zimbabwe, again, greatest hyperinflation in history, I'm less concerned about the insidious or even year-over-year entirely predictable, we talked about it, uptick in inflation post-COVID. Predictable, understandable, can be framed, excused, understood. Is it sustainable? And is that a risk? I am personally less concerned about the protracted increased uptick in inflation in the United States right now. Why? Because the greater risk, for sure, you just have to do the math, is asset deflation. We're all paying attention to how much money is being printed, but if I print $10 new and 1,000 new dollars of credit are hinged off of that, what's the risk? The risk is to the $1,000 in credit that has been expanded, not the $10. And that's what's happened. The scale of growth of debt over and above actual greenbacks has eclipsed the growth of greenbacks. That's dangerous. A credit deflationary environment, and no one can believe it right now. They'll say, frame, it hasn't happened, therefore it won't, etc. So that it has my attention. Not as a forecast, but just as a risk assessment. And the beauty of it is that inflation's, again, speaking from personal experience, a heck of a lot easier to navigate than deflation.
Yes.
Asset deflation is it's a beast with no master, and that is what the Federal Reserve is terrified of.
Yes.
They fear that more than anything.
Yeah. Well, they've made it virtually a mandate that they will do everything they can to protect asset prices. I mean, that's what they've shown so far. How far can they go with that? Well, I guess time will tell. But no, I agree with you. If you enjoyed watching or learning from this video, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more content. If you have a question about any of my content or this specific video, just please leave a comment down below. And as always, stay focused on your freedom. I'll see you next time.